On February 12, 1809, in a modest cabin near Hodgenville, Hardin County, Kentucky, Abraham Lincoln was born to Thomas Lincoln and Nancy Hanks Lincoln. Unlike many stories suggest, while the family wasn't wealthy, Thomas Lincoln owned land and was a respected carpenter in the community. Young Abraham spent his early years in Kentucky, where he first experienced the challenges of frontier life.
Você já parou para pensar que enquanto escuta essa história poderia estar entendendo cada palavra em inglês de forma natural, sem precisar ir ficar lendo essa legenda que está na tela? Isso não acontece com você pelo simples motivo de que você não recebe feedback diário e nem pratica seu inglês. Por esse motivo, nós criamos o CAS, um super professor de inglês de inteligência artificial que você usa no seu próprio WhatsApp. Mas ele não é uma simples IA, é um super professor particular que você tem acesso 24 horas por dia, onde ele te ensina, corrige seus erros e ainda simula conversas reais por áudio e texto, e ainda se adapta ao seu ritmo. Tudo isso sem sair do app que você já usa o tempo todo. E tem mais, essa IA foi treinada com cérebros de professores renomados, então você vai aprender com a melhor didática possível. Então se você já tentou de tudo e ainda não viu resultados, o CAS vai ser a virada de chave que você precisa. O link está na descrição.
His father taught him to farm and handle tools, while his mother, who could read and write, introduced him to books and encouraged his early education. In 1816, the Lincoln family moved to southern Indiana. Life in their new home in Little Pigeon Creek proved challenging, as they had to clear dense forests to create farmland. During their first year, they lived in a half-faced camp, a three-sided shelter, until they could build a proper cabin. Tragedy struck in 1818 when Nancy Hanks Lincoln died of milk sickness, a disease caused by drinking milk from cows that had eaten poisonous plants. Abraham was only 9 years old. Her death deeply affected the family, especially young Abraham, who helped his father build her coffin. The loss of his mother marked a significant turning point in Lincoln's early life, shaping his character and leaving him with memories that would influence his future perspectives on life and death. Youth and education. In December 1819, Thomas Lincoln married Sarah Bush Johnston, a widow with 3 children. This marriage brought significant changes to young Abraham's life. Sarah proved to be a caring stepmother who encouraged his passion for learning and brought new books into the household. Despite having less than a year of formal education, Lincoln was determined to learn. He borrowed books from neighbors, often walking miles to get them. Among these were influential works like Robinson Crusoe, Pilgrim's Progress, and Life of Washington. At night, he would read by firelight, often making notes using charcoal on wooden boards when paper wasn't available. During these formative years, Lincoln grew remarkably tall and strong. He worked various jobs to help support his family, splitting rails, working as a farmhand, and operating a flatboat on the Mississippi River. His physical strength and work ethic earned him respect in the community. Lincoln also began developing his skills as a public speaker. He would often climb onto a tree stump after work and repeat stories and speeches he had heard, entertaining fellow workers. This practice helped him develop the clear, persuasive speaking style that would later define his political career. By 1830, at the age of 21, Lincoln had not only educated himself far beyond what was common for frontier youth, but had also developed a reputation as a thoughtful, hard-working young man with a gift for clear expression. In 1830, the Lincoln family moved to Illinois, settling near Decatur. At 21, Abraham was ready to make his own way in life. He traveled to New Salem, Illinois, where he found work as a flatboatman on the Sangamon River, transporting goods to New Orleans. In New Salem, Lincoln took a job as a clerk in Denton Offutt's store, where he first gained real public attention. His honest business practices earned him the nickname Honest Abe. When customers were accidentally overcharged, he would often walk miles to return their money. During the Black Hawk War of 1832, Lincoln's leadership qualities emerged. His fellow soldiers elected him as their captain, a moment he later described as more satisfying than any of his later political successes. Although his company never saw combat, This experience helped build his reputation. After the war, Lincoln pursued his political ambitions. In 1832, he launched his first campaign for the Illinois state legislature. Though he lost this election, he won the majority of votes in his own district, demonstrating his growing local popularity. This early defeat didn't discourage him. Instead, it taught him valuable lessons about political campaigning. His reputation for honesty and clear reasoning made him a successful lawyer, handling cases ranging from property disputes to murder trials. During this period, Lincoln met Mary Todd, a well-educated woman from a prominent Kentucky family. Despite a briefly broken engagement, they married on November 4, 1842. Their marriage would produce 4 sons, though only Robert would survive to adulthood. Lincoln's law practice flourished as he traveled the 8th Judicial Circuit, covering several counties in Illinois. This experience broadened his network of political connections and deepened his understanding of the common people's concerns. He often represented the Illinois Central Railroad but also took cases for poor clients who couldn't afford legal fees. His political career also advanced during these years. Serving 4 terms in the Illinois state legislature, Lincoln became a leading voice in the Whig Party. In 1846, he won election to the U.S. Congress, where he served 1 term. During his time in Congress, he spoke out against the Mexican War and supported the Wilmot Proviso, which would have banned slavery in territories acquired from Mexico. By 1850, Lincoln had established himself as a respected lawyer and politician, known for his logical arguments and ability to connect with ordinary citizens. His experiences during this period shaped his views on important national issues, particularly slavery and economic development. The 1850s marked a crucial turning point in Lincoln's political career. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which allowed new territories to decide the slavery question for themselves, drew Lincoln back into politics. He joined the newly formed Republican Party, which opposed the expansion of slavery into new territories. In 1858, Lincoln challenged Stephen A. Douglas for his Senate seat in Illinois. The resulting Lincoln-Douglas debates became famous across the nation. While Lincoln lost the Senate race, these debates established him as a national figure. His clear arguments against slavery's expansion resonated with many Northern voters. During this period, Lincoln refined his position on slavery. He argued that while the Constitution protected slavery where it existed, the nation's founders had placed it on a path to extinction. His famous House Divided speech warned that the nation could not endure permanently half slave and half free. In 1860, the Republican Party nominated Lincoln for president. Despite massive casualties and strong opposition from the Peace Democrats, Lincoln maintained his resolve to achieve both Union victory and emancipation. He ran for re-election in 1864 under the National Union Party banner, winning a decisive victory. His second inaugural address called for reconciliation and healing, speaking of malice toward none, with charity for all. Lincoln's attempts to prevent war through his conciliatory first inaugural address ultimately failed to prevent the coming conflict. Presidential years. Lincoln's presidency was immediately consumed by the Civil War. In April 1861, Confederate forces attacked Fort Sumter in South Carolina, marking the beginning of the conflict. As commander-in-chief, Lincoln faced the enormous challenge of preserving the Union while managing a war that would become the deadliest in American history. Early in the war, Lincoln focused primarily on military strategy, working to develop effective leadership for the Union Army. He spent long hours studying military tactics and personally visited troops. After several unsuccessful generals, he finally found success with Ulysses S. Grant, whom he promoted to lieutenant general in 1864. On January 1, 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, transforming the war's purpose. This document declared slaves in rebellious states to be free, changing the conflict from a war solely about preserving the Union to one also about ending slavery. Later that year, at the dedication of the Gettysburg National Cemetery, he delivered his famous Gettysburg Address, redefining American democracy and human equality in just 272 words. Between campaign activities, Lincoln worked to improve his education. He began teaching himself law, borrowing law books and studying independently. His determination to advance himself, combined with his natural intelligence and work ethic, set the stage for his future career in law and politics. In 1837, Lincoln made a significant move to Springfield, Illinois, the state capital, to pursue his legal career. He received his law license and joined John Todd Stewart's law practice. By early 1865, the Union's military success, combined with Lincoln's political leadership, had brought the war near its end. The surrender of Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9, 1865, effectively ended the Civil War. On April 14, 1865, just 5 days after Lee's surrender, Lincoln attended a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. During the performance of Our American Cousin, John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer, entered the president's box and shot him. Lincoln died the next morning at a boarding house across the street, becoming the first American president to be assassinated. Lincoln's death came at a crucial moment in American history. He had already begun planning for Reconstruction, advocating a moderate approach to reuniting the nation. His last public speech, delivered on April 11th, had suggested extending voting rights to some African Americans, particularly veterans, a stance that may have prompted Booth's actions. His presidency transformed the nation in fundamental ways. The 13th Amendment, passed with his strong support, permanently abolished slavery throughout the United States. His leadership preserved the Union through its greatest crisis, establishing the supremacy of the federal government over state governments. Lincoln's influence extends far beyond his time. His vision of democracy as government of the people, by the people, for the people continues to inspire nations worldwide. His leadership style, combining pragmatism with moral principles, has become a model for political leaders. Today, Lincoln is consistently ranked by historians as one of America's greatest presidents. His monuments, including the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., have become symbols of American democracy and the ongoing struggle for human rights. His words and actions continue to guide discussions about democracy, equality, and national unity.
Se você gostou desse vídeo, não se esqueça de se inscrever no canal. E também dá uma conferida lá no cast que tá aqui na descrição desse vídeo para você aprender inglês mais rápido. Até a próxima!